Welcome to my healing rooms. Today I'm very honored to be here with Dr. Gabriel Cousens, who is a medical doctor, a healer, and author of acclaimed books. He's known all over the world. He's an ordained rabbi. He's a mystic. He has done so much on his healing journey. So, and most importantly, I feel that he's a seeker of truth and ultimately love, which is what I'm picking up. So, welcome.
Thank you, Barbara. It's
so
good
nice
to be here.
Really happy to have you here.
So what I'd like to do is really start with a prayer. And the meaning of the prayer is the mystical walk between the merging of the heavens and the earth, because that walk is key. Okay, so we're going to start with that prayer. Yishem Yikud Kudushabrihu Ushehinte Bi Ilu Imu Laihed Shem Yuke Bevavke Bira Shem Hashem Kozrael Ko Alam. Amen. And that's the real secret, is feeling the merging of the heavens and earth, the walk of the practical mystic.
So if that's the secret, and I was going to ask you how we balance mind, body, soul, spirit, just explain it in any way that you want.
From the Torah tradition, there's only God. From the yogic tradition, there's only God. From the Taoist position, there's only the Tao. But they're all saying the same thing. Okay? However, if we start to fragment and say there's only God and we just stay up here, we aren't able to integrate it back down into the physical plane. So the Torah teaches we are multi-dimensional beings. There's an emphasis on that. So it asks and it clarifies your actions ultimately are the result of your thoughts, are the result of your spiritual awareness, and are really a reflection of the divine coming through you. So the question is, what do we do? So at the highest level of awareness, sometimes it takes, in the enlightenment process, it takes a few years to integrate.
Years?
Yeah, to integrate.
Years, right?
Yeah. And that integration is what the prayer is about, is how do you integrate the flow from the heavens, and the heavens are the astral plane and above, they're not the stars, okay?
Right.
Okay, down to the physical plane to be the full multi-dimensional expression of the divine we're meant to be, okay? And so that holds true, I believe, in really some of the really key traditions, is how are you a full expression? And the Native American, as a Native American sun dancer and spirit dance chief, clan spirit dance chief, we say, "O Mitakio Asan." Oh, right. It means all my relations. What are we talking about? The rock people, the sprouting ones, okay, the life fooders like that, the sprouting ones, the walking ones, the flying ones, okay? And finally, Meddebur, the talking ones with history, because animals talk too. So when you're in all those levels of relationship, you know, that's just one set of the physical plane, and then you have the, what we call the 5 levels of soul, the Kabbalistic, you know, the world of Asiya, which is the physical plane, okay? And then you have the level of Yitzhak, the astral plane. And then you have the Neshama, the individual soul. And then you have the Chaya, which is the oversoul connecting the oneness. But there's more than the oneness. And finally the Siyahida, which links you into the nothing. And at the highest level of awareness, you die into the nothing. What does that mean? It means you disappear. That's different than samadhi, where there's a you in samadhi. So in yoga we have nirvikalpa samadhi, dying into the void, sankalpa samadhi, where you kind of merge into the white light. Okay.
When you say disappear,
I mean you as an I amness
right,
disappears.
Into the oneness.
Well, there's no oneness left. You just everything disappears.
So there's just nothing.
There's nothing.
Nothingness.
Yeah.
So on
and
this
that's
earth,
the deeper meaning of the divine. And the walk is how do you hold that awareness,
Right.
all 5 levels of awareness, in an integrated way. So there people get this level of awareness and that level of awareness, but it's not integrated. Okay, there's a person who could be a master of the physical plane, but they haven't integrated the other planes. So that prayer is about integrating all the planes, 5 levels of the soul. And as we do that, when we reincarnate, all those come, well, basically the top 3 are more or less what incarnates, but as you're more and more integrated, all 5 incarnate, even look the same.
So we incarnate and we have karma, right?
Right.
Okay. So being in this body as a spirit, and based on everything you said, can you guide us a little bit on how to do this in a way that is going to help us to become freer, to feel lighter, to not suffer?
Yeah. So Buddha had a sentence about suffering. Life is suffering. But the second part of the sentence nobody heard. Life is suffering for the unawake. Okay? Whether he said that or not, that's the key. So once you understand that we incarnate to play out varieties of karma, both good and quote good, quote bad karma, that's part of the liberation process. Now there's another place, we call it the Bodhisattva in the Buddhist tradition, but it's the pledge to keep coming back even after enlightenment to help the rest of the world. Right. So in the Torah tradition, it's inherent that everybody has to be enlightened for the whole process to move on. So it's inherent that you keep coming back. I mean, you make a choice, but you keep coming back till everybody, we call it the Messianic time.
Right, has reached that.
Okay, as Jeremiah said, from the greatest to the least, they will know me in their hearts. Okay, so one just keeps doing it because you're part of the collective, whereas the Eastern has more of an emphasis on the individual.
Would you use the words raising your frequency or vibration? Does that have a meaning to you when you're talking about this, or not really?
It's not language I use a lot. The fact is that happens. The way I more or less talk about it is how to become a superconductor of the divine, so that one surrenders to the divine will. So you don't have your frequency, there is just the divine will.
That's really well put. So surrender is a big...
You're surrendering to that which is within you. Now, a lot of my work and my training and my acknowledgement was really with Swami Muktananda and Swami Prakashananda, and it has to do with Shakti Kundalini, which is the divine energy that comes down and in a sense lodges at the base of the spine into the more physical plane. When it's awakened, begins to move out throughout the whole organism, from what we call the chakra system, and then the koshas, which are layers of the mind, then beyond the mind it goes, but it purifies everything, from the DNA to the cell, the organ, and then beyond the mind. So what I'm talking about is it doesn't work if you don't surrender.
So there's surrender, but then...
To you. You're surrendering to yourself.
To yourself.
You're surrendering to the force of God within yourself. That's really key. It's not anything about somebody outside of yourself.
Inside.
Yeah. And we have the program, the best kept secret, right? And can you surrender? And Shaktipat, which I received from Muktananda initially in 1975, is the awakening of the force, the spiritualizing force called Kundalini. It's called different things in different traditions, and it goes up through all the body until finally there's a merging of the sacred masculine, in the yoga it's called Shiva, with the sacred feminine Shakti.
You said you received it. It was...
Well, he blew into my mouth and the whole energy went into me, and then, that was my first disappearance. You know, I disappeared. When I came back out of that, a little voice rang out and said, you should learn to eat and live in a way that supports the Kundalini. So I wasn't quite sure what Kundalini was, but that became my journey into spiritual nutrition. Okay, but the key here is we have these forces ultimately integrating the sacred masculine, sacred feminine. In the Kabbalistic tradition, in the Tree of Life, we have Nok, the sacred feminine, and Zirampin, the sacred masculine. They become one. That's the central column. Okay, and then you have Shiva and Shakti, and ultimately in that oneness, there's the final integration, even of the Adam and Eve story, where they were separate, they become as one again and become the real image of God. It is the oneness that's the image of God. And then you go beyond that until there's you as the image of God, and then finally there's no you. And you disappear into the nothing. The Hebrew word for it is histalkut, dying into the nothing. And that's why they say you can't know God and live. And it's true, not that you're going to physically die, but you have to disappear to know God in the deepest way. You can't be separate. The I amness is the subtle level. We have time, history, space, physical, and so forth. And I amness, those three components all have to go away. Mostly, if we're going to operate in this world, you got some I amness left. Yeah. But that's okay, because you can still disappear and die into the nothing at any time. That's part of the enlightenment process. Now here's the thing that's important as part of a prior question. You have to approach it without it going anywhere.
Can you?
Yeah, I'll make that. So that's a big statement, because it's like, what are you talking about? The point is, I talk about the 6 foundations. And those 6 foundations are really the truth in all the traditions in different variations. Okay, so first there's a physical aspect. In almost all the great traditions, there's no spilling of blood. They're basically at least lacto-vegetarian, no spilling of blood, no death.
And that includes fish, I mean, anything that has...
Meat, fish, and chicken, anything that bleeds.
Okay, and does that, what about, I just want to ask you quickly, because people always ask, eggs and dairy products.
In the traditional yoga culture, you had some, not eggs, they're considered what we call tamasic, and they're actually excess yang and imbalance you. And basically, in the yoga, they'll say, you know, it's the menstruation of the hen. Right. So it's a lower energy. Oh. But dairy, until we knew about B12 supplements, dairy as a little bit of yogurt was key for, you know, being healthy. Right. Okay, but even the originator of the Krishna movement, I have a quote from him saying, just fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds are sufficient, okay, in this time and age. But as a person involved in holistic health, meat eaters and vegans and live fooders are all going to be a certain amount deficient in B12, which can block your development in many levels. And depending on your physiology, it may take 30 years to show up. But the point is, the highest level, okay, I'm going to just give you an example. At B12, you need 200 nanograms, 180 to 200, to be survival level, okay? Optimal level is 400 to 450. So at the survival level, 40% of meat eaters and 80% of people vegan live food are going to be deficient. But at the optimal level, then you just upped it to maybe 80% of meat eaters, 90% of live food vegans. So I recommend, in general, everybody should take a B12 supplement. I'm just making a little point about we're all unique, but we all have to have our coverage. And so it's good to take a living B12, meaning bacteria-based B12, which is available today. Right. It's not a problem for anybody of any kind of dietary thing to do that. So that's just at the lowest level. Okay, so we have spiritual nutrition and have spiritual fasting. Traditionally, fasting has been the great spiritual work that in all the different traditions.
You fast, right?
I fast twice a year on a regular basis, and at the tree we have 3 kinds of fasts. We have our 21-day program where it's like a spiritual fast, but it's green juices and it's part of the diabetes program and transition program for people and a detox. And then we have a separate detox program where people can come anytime individually. And then we have another program which we offer twice a year called Portals to Liberation, which is a much more intensified spiritual fasting. So we have 3 forms. But I fast twice a year. I feel it's essential with the amount of toxicity that we have today.
How long do you fast for?
Just 7 days. I've done the 40-day and 21-day.
Spiritual fasting it's an awareness that you bring into the...
Exactly. And that's where we're meditating 3 times a day, and we're doing what we call the tri-yoga, which is my wife teaches, which is a flowing yoga, which possibly was the way how Kundalini first awoke, and then people were meant through Kriyas, which then people saw it looks like yoga, and yoga didn't exist, and so they began to copy it, and that was where you got yoga asana. It's just a way of thinking about it. They were copying the Kriyas, because once the Kundalini is awake, it may put you through a full yoga sequence.
Can someone awaken their Kundalini without doing, if they are physically impaired, doing yoga physically?
Well, the best way, and I'm just talking traditionally what the teachers say, is Shaktipat. You don't really have to do Hatha Yoga to awaken the Kundalini, and that doesn't have the percentages. Okay, so Shaktipat, which is the transmission of energy, which is what I've been empowered to do through my...
So you do that. You give people...
Shaktipat, right.
Got the right terminology, give...
Well, basically what happens, you're like a vehicle for the energy going through.
Right, wow.
And so that's fine, 1. 2, build the prana, build the life force, build the chi, they're different words, build the nefesh. And as that expands, consciousness expands. So that's, and that's pranayama, the yoga asana, qigong, tai chi, sacred dance. I mean, it builds and expands the field.
And it's conscious movement.
Yeah.
Okay.
3rd is service and charity.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're doing a lot of service. Okay, and where does that take you? It's what the world needs. Okay, so service and charity are part of it. It's a way of connecting. And an insight, if is truly who you're serving. You're burning your karma.
Yeah, I was going to say it's very selfish in a way because it makes you feel great, and you're right.
You're burning karma. So that's really the essence. Now, any beggar at what we call the coat tailor rally will tell you that. I'm doing you a favor.
Right.
By you doing it. Okay. 4th, if people are ready, is to work with a spiritual teacher. And part of that is also the study of the great scriptures. Okay, whatever that tradition is.
Right.
3rd is what we call yoga vairagya, equal vision. Okay, seeing God in all things, and he would call histavut, seeing the spark of God in all people equally. Okay, everybody has different roles,
right.
But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about seeing that spark of God in all equally. And then viveka is the ability to tell the difference between the absolute reality and the temporal reality.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Well, Ein Sof Tov in Hebrew means there's only God. That's the absolute reality. Okay. The temporal reality is, some people think this is it on the physical plane and that's all what life is about. There's a big difference. They play together because the temporal reality is your way of evolving, if you understand it that way. But if you don't understand that way and there's no higher presence, you're just like another animal, and that allows you to be easily enslaved. Okay, so you see where we're going with that. So you have to integrate both those realities, the walk between the heavens and the earth, the absolute reality, which transcends all form and all time and even all I amness. Okay, so that's step 4. Step 5 is what we call in Hebrew kol damama, sacred silence, prayer, meditation, chanting the holy names, okay? That's what we're,
for example,
yeah, and repeating the mantra, whatever the tradition, because it keeps you focused on God. And then the 5th level is the awakening of the spiritual force, which in yoga we call kundalini, in Hebrew we call the Shekinah energy or the Ruach HaKodesh. It's all the same stuff. It's all the same spiritualizing force.
Through the...
Well, the easiest is by touch. And it says, when Moses was ready to leave his body, he touched Yehoshua and the spirit was within him. That's classic, transmission of energy.
Right.
So it's in all the different traditions. It's classic at the Shaktipat tradition, by look, by touch, by sound, by breath. Okay, breath's a little bit more unusual, but that's what we're talking about. But that's my point. Okay, so those are the levels of the 6 foundations, and as you evolve, there's no order to it. They all support each other, and they aren't exactly prioritized, because you really need all 6 foundations ultimately to make it work.
I agree. So on that note, if someone is doing charity and prayer and chanting, but they're eating dense food or a lot of meat, is that going to set them back a bit, do you believe?
Right, because it blocks the flow of the spiritualizing force. Also, when you're taking in blood, you're taking in the spirit of the animal, so it then brings you more physical.
Right.
Okay. And you're also creating cruelty. And I think, as Buddha said, there'll be ghosts coming in later days. They're called brickshaws. They'll tell you that you can eat meat and be liberated. You can't live off the life force of other sentient beings and think you're going to get liberated.
Well, someone said the other day, it was an animal communicator, that anyone who could harm an animal is just really disconnected from their relationship with the divine. Because if you were connected, you could never, ever do that.
Exactly, that's the point.
Right.
So it's fundamental contradiction. If you're eating meat, and there is at least one spiritual path that does that, but it brings you into kind of a blockage of the higher levels.
And then to talk about what you do, it's food that is putting the meat aside, that's alive. Can you talk about that a bit?
Let's start with the idea that by living this way, by the 6th foundation, you create a quiet mind, which is kind of the first step of yoga in a way, so you can transcend the mind.
Right.
Okay. Now, once you're doing that, you kind of see the universe a little different. So all your actions are about how we can upgrade the web of life on the planet. That's key here, right?
Yeah.
So by not killing, by not spilling blood, you're obviously upgrading the web of life. Okay? Now, when you cook food, you are altering its frequency. You're losing 50% of the protein and 60 to 70% of vitamins and minerals and 95% of the more subtle nutrients in the whole picture. And obviously that's going to create some effect, because the live food has the frequency of the living planet. You cook it, you've altered it.
Right.
And you're also affecting the unbroken wholeness. So that's what happens with that.
Right, so it is about the frequency and the energy of, I guess, everything we do, everything we say, everything we eat, it really kind of, it's a walking meditation with everything that we do, ultimately.
Right, and there are different terms, but I like the yoga tradition it talks about Sanatana Dharma, which means the natural way of living that brings you to liberation. That's what we're talking about.
Sounds good to me.
It's just a natural way of being. In terms of 6 foundations, I say, you may practice it, but where you're going with it is to be lived by it. Okay? So you become aligned with it. And I'll use the word will of God, which is Keter, which is the top of the Kabbalistic tree of life. Keter is the divine will. So at some point, you have surrendered significantly to the divine will, so you simply become the expression of the divine will in your life. And there's no resistance. So that's where it all kind of goes, if you get it. There's just no resistance. You simply are the expression of the divine will. Ultimately, when we talk about the Tao, it's the same kind of thing. You're just the Tao unfolding. You're just the divine will unfolding. And that just happens to you. So I brought in another concept. It's called grace. So the 6 foundations, you're being lived by it, you practice it, you're being lived by it eventually. It quiets the mind. But liberation requires grace. And that's something you can't earn. By definition, grace is something that has nothing to do with you.
It just happens?
Yeah, it just happens, but there's one other little catch to it. You can't hold the grace if you haven't prepared. So if you haven't become a superconductor of the divine, and how you're living, thinking, interacting, and so forth, then when grace happens, whenever it happens, it just may inspire you for a short time and you lose it. But when you've prepared the vessels, then they can hold the grace. And so the full value of the grace of enlightenment you can hold. That's the difference here. So you can't earn grace, but you can prepare for it.
And it just happens. It's
That's
grace.
why it's called grace.
That's why it's grace.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about your center because we have limited time. People can access really everything that you spoke about at the Tree of Life Rejuvenation Center in Arizona.
Yeah, it's really designed to do that. It's designed to be the living experience of the 6 foundations. You're out in nature. We're 4,000 feet up. It's really nice. Arizona's really, really beautiful. You can actually see the physical sky, which most people can't, in other places in the world. And it's a place where grace happens. And in that way, that's the key. So we're both the living tree of life, that's why we call it Tree of Life, which is the model of liberation. And it's a place where the spiritual energy has gathered from all the work that's been done. We've been there 21 years. So it's highlighted that way. And the deep teachings, Torah teachings, Taoist teachings, and really the ancient rishis, which were the ancient kind of sages in India, they all follow the live food diet, which is pretty important, okay? And they lived in nature.
Yeah, it's so important.
It's very, very important. So we have 100% guaranteed organic live food diet. Okay, rarely do we have that anywhere in the world, and that's part of the 6 foundations. But it's it's something that we offer. It's unique. We also teach organic, veganic farming.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's a big plus.
That's a big plus because
plus.
You're not taking any bone meal, and blood meal, and manure into the system because. A lot of people don't know it, but 13%, up to 13% of Alzheimer's is mad cow disease. So
wow,
we that's right, we still have that. That was worked on at New Jersey Medical School, I believe. But the point being is, so that's coming through the blood, it's coming through the bone meal, so can it possibly even affect vegan if you get it. So by teaching this, and we have an apprentice program in it for that. We have an apprentice program in how to prepare what we call healing live foods, because you can have really sweet live foods too, right? And you can have non-organic live food. You can,
right.
So it's a 6-month program there, Plus we have a master's program in spiritual nutrition, and we have a priest and priestess program for people who want to be out, teaching in that way. So there's a few things.
So you can do a lot. You can actually study there.
Yeah.
As well. That's incredible.
Yeah. It's called the Dr. Cousens School of Holistic Wellness, and you can actually get a master's degree if you want to go that far. But we also have other certifications.
And I heard the food is delicious, which is a common misconception that raw live food is not good. It's really, once you eat it, you really don't want to go back.
That's right. So we have a cycle of 28 live food entrees. Wow. Plus, the food's fresh. It's not like it's getting shipped in from California. Majority of it is grown in our own garden, picked that day, and comes.
And you have a cookbook too that people can get, right?
We have more like recipe books. There is a Cure to Diabetes has a lot of recipes. Rainbow Green Life for Cuisine has a lot of recipes. Conscious Eating has lots of recipes. Spiritual Nutrition has some recipes. And
we'll have all the books up on the site.
Yeah.
I just want to thank you for being here, and unfortunately it's always too short. The work that you're doing in the world is so incredible. I really do feel so honored to be here. And if there's just a parting message you have for everyone,
okay,
what would it be?
Well, when we look at the 6 foundations, we have an opportunity for the healing of the planet. We ourselves actually have programs in Africa and really West Africa and in 4 different countries, as well as Mexico, where we're doing a lot of work teaching people to grow their own food, preventing diabetes. We all have our own service. And so the blessing is is to let yourself be lived by the 6 foundations, and in that process access your sacred design. So may everybody be blessed that they are able to access their sacred design, which is your life purpose, and ultimately become the expression. In different traditions we can call it Dharma, where your highest purpose is to know God, is enlightenment. But in the process, it's your personal gift that you give to the world is the other level of and the specific of sacred design. So may everyone be blessed with both the highest purpose of life, to know God, and the means of doing that, which is the expression of your sacred design. May you find it and be the expression of it. Amen, amen, amen.
Thank you.